Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to tell you about this sword right here. It is the Hanwei Meijin Katana, or at least I think it's called the Mejin Katana. And more or less, it is a sword I bought secondhand recently in a pile of swords, and I have really liked it. I've come close to buying this sword a number of times over the last couple decades, and well, I just never quite saw eye to eye with whoever happened to be selling it at the time. And this was a sword, and is still a sword as far as I'm aware, that is discontinued and that you can't go out and buy. So regrettably, if you like what you see in this video, you aren't going to be able to go and just buy one. But if you find one secondhand in the wild out there, you'll at least be better prepared to know if it's worth your hard-earned money or not. Now, to me, I will tell you right out of the gate, I really like the sword, and I kind of regret now not buying it earlier on. It's very light and lively in the category of the Hanwei Shinto and the Orchid in terms of this practitioner's lively piece that you can move around kind of effortlessly for the better part of a day if you're doing training and want to train with a Hanwei blade or a live blade, and you happen to like what Hanwei has to offer. So anyway, I really like it, suffice to say, but I will elaborate on why throughout the course of this video. Now, I do think that this sword was discontinued, I should say, really before I dove headfirst into the hobby, and so I want to say it was over $1,000 or something like that, ballpark in terms of MSRP, but I don't really know, and I'm not sure what they sold for. It's made of Hanwei's folded steel, if you will, so it's in the category of their higher end stuff like the Kami Katana, the Tori Katana, the Tiger Katana, etc. But for whatever reason, this one may not have been as popular. I don't know why it was discontinued, but I can only assume because it was either A, pain in the butt to make, or B, because nobody bought them. And it does have a less zazzy theme than some of the other swords out there. It's got a kind of wave theme going on, like the tsunami kind of aggressive waves going on, and it has kind of a simple black scabbard that has some depth when you look at it up close. It has this striping pattern on here that alternates between gloss and kind of an ishime style, but I don't know if it just wasn't special enough, didn't draw the eye the same way that some of the other higher end offerings did, and it was discontinued. Anyway, I'll go over soups and nuts top to bottom and cover some of the stuff. So down at the bottom we have a wave themed kashra. Hanwei, I'm not going to harp on this across every one of the fittings, but I'll just say they do a really good job with casting. You've heard me say this on a number of videos related to Hanwei swords. Lots of fittings are cast. If this were hand engraved and done the traditional way, I'm sure the fuchi would probably cost as much as the entire sword does, but for a cast fitting, there's lots of details and whatnot that are in here that appear really quite good. If I compare them to some traditionally made pieces, they're not the same, but they are well done for cast fittings, and I think Hanwei still and continues to this day to have that be a really special part of what they offer in their swords, is very detailed and ornate fittings. Or at least very well cast fittings for the replication market. Anyway, it's a small kashra as well, so it's on there. It doesn't wiggle around. It's very tight, but these very small kashra, while traditional, I do find make me nervous about coming off. There's not probably a lot of adhesive under here. There's not. Anyway, they make me nervous about them coming off. This one is still on there pretty tight, but I bet if I were to use it a lot, it wouldn't necessarily stay that way. The other bits to know are the transitions. This is a better done piece by Hanwei. It's not bunchy near where all this little the kashra down at the end here lines up. It's not bunchy at all. It's not particularly bunchy in the knots. Everything seems relatively tight, and also just where the samegawa terminates and stuff is also very cleanly done for a Hanwei piece. Very often the ito is a little haphazard and runs around and can kind of be bunchy, and this is overall reasonably well fitted. In terms of ito as well, tightness is actually not bad. Now this gets a passing grade. Ideally with sword ito, you can take this and really just lay all your weight into it and it doesn't move. And there are a few sword companies out there that make ito that tight. They tend to be a few $1,000s, unfortunately. Very rarely in reproduction market swords or kind of $1,000, $500 swords is ito particularly tight. This is able to be moved a millimeter or so if I push on it hard. I would say that gets a generally passing grade. It's not going to fall apart immediately on use, but chances are it's going to loosen up over time and you'll want to blast it with some lacquer or something like that. The nodules on the samegawa skin are also pretty large. I think I make out an emperor node here, so it's a nicer skin. It does appear to be paneled, but the panels are recessed in the handle. Unfortunately, Hanwei didn't typically do full wraps of samegawa, and I don't think this is any exception, but I don't make out any of the wooden slats or anything other than samegawa here. It's reasonably well tied for Hanwei, given that the standard for Hanwei isn't always super high, even on their higher end pieces. Very often you would see the diamonds wander around quite a bit more than they do here, where you would see signs of the wood core of the handle somewhere in there. Anyway, overall, this is reasonably well done. Shape of the handle as well is very comfortable. It's a little bit more slender, and I happen to like this. Hanwei offers a number of things that they're famous for with the axe handle, where it's a little bit more robust a handle, a little bit made for more North American giant sausage hands. But even though I have a pretty big sausage finger grip, I tend to prefer these smaller handles. They feel a little bit more elegant in my hand, and if I'm training for a long session, if I'm going to a long class or a seminar or something, I usually bring something with a little bit more slender a handle. If I'm cutting, I prefer that as well. Anyway, Fuchi transition, also good. Fuchi as well has a wave theme to it. All the fittings do, and it overall, I guess, looks the part and blends in pretty well. I forgot to mention there are Manuki. These appear to be the same ones as on the Shinto, I think, and that they're golden dragon fittings. They're in there a little bit subtly, so my eye doesn't get instantly pulled to them, but it's about the only spot of kind of bright, shiny metallic surface that's on the sword. At a distance, though, my eye isn't inherently pulled to it, but it, I don't know, dragons and waves. It's all right. There could have been some wave thing. It's the only thing that isn't a wave on here. Okay, anyway, tsuba. The tsuba has, again, same wave theme. It's a quality cast piece. It's a little bit on the square side, and there are some, well, the rim of it isn't necessarily fitted or done with the same wave theme, but it blends in, I guess I should say, a little bit, and that some of the waves kind of wrap over just a little bit, and that's appreciated. I like the three-dimensionality of having the rim incorporated in terms of the wave theme and whatnot. I think some of that might just be casting lines or pressed or something like that. It doesn't have the same detail, but if it's a happy accident, all the same, I enjoy the overall look of the tsuba. It's also worth noting that it has lots of little points and bits and stuff like that from the waves, but none of them are sharp enough to really bite into the meat of my hand. So if I choke up on the grip and I turn it around, there's not knuckle meat stuck in those little crevices or anything like that. So it's still comfortable enough to use. All right, I'll talk about the scabbard. So this is one tube. It doesn't have the dimension that some of the newer pieces do today. It has a reasonably well-tied sageo. Unfortunately, some of the paint around the kurigata area here, which is horn and I think a nice piece, has started to crack a little bit. It has a little bit of rattle. Not a lot, but a little bit. And in Japanese swords, that's not ideal. It's not a huge amount, but if you're walking about town and your sword is rattling, the rattle is likely going to mean the sword is rubbing on some wood surface inside the scabbard and will diminish the polish over time, and that's not ideal. So they're supposed to hold and not rattle quite a bit. And then something that is supposed to be touching is kind of up here. There's a tension that's supposed to happen here so that the sword doesn't fall out if you bend over, and this one has lost the tension. It's not lost in such a way that it can't be reclaimed. You glue in a little shim between, like kind of on the front of where the habaki holds, and then that friction fit can be restored. I do happen to like this kind of striped pattern here. So it goes between like a gloss and ishime kind of finish. It's a very subtle kind of just opaque ishime finish. It doesn't have kind of the kind of granule charcoal bits or something like that in it, and it delivers this kind of very nice striped look to it that abates fingerprints a little bit and is overall, I think very, very handsome. I happen to like overall the way it looks. I would say at a distance I did not think it was particularly special until I got it, and up close and in person it has an element of charm that a solid color doesn't, and I like it. Now I'll talk about the blade, the pointy stabby part. And right away, there's some stuff that jumps out at you on this blade. One, it's got a very big bohie on it for a blade that seems relatively small. It seems a little wider than usual. It also has a very bold hada on it, and it jumps out in almost any light. It's also very erratic and different in a few spots, but in any light, it really stands out. Now, I don't know if all the Meijin katanas have this kind of bold hada on them. Historically, from Hanwei, I've had a number of the tori and the kami and other iterations of Hanwei swords, and they all tend to vary a little bit. So there's no guarantee if you found one of these that the hada would be bold if that's a facet of this sword that you happen to like. But this example is, and it's something that I like. It also has the frosty Hanwei decorative, or not decorative, but overly etched hamon on here. The Kasaki is terminated, and I suspect that some of the rattling is around this Kasaki because that's where most of the sai rub or kind of scuffs and whatnot that I see are. But there's a Yokote on here, and the termination of the bohi, or the fullering area here, is also reasonably well done. There is some integration of distal taper measurements, and all of that are in the description down below. And it has, overall, I would say, just a very pleasant curvature and look. It doesn't have the characteristic kind of Hanwei spearhead swelled tip. A lot of times Hanwei will have a little bit more of a reinforced Kasaki on here. I don't see that on this one. And the profile and taper are, I don't know, they blend into what you see on most swords that are 28 inches nowadays. There's nothing particularly special about the general shaping, other than the bohi's just a little bit wider and the hada's a little bit bolder. But when it comes to moving it around, it does feel a little bit special. So this is only 2 pounds, 2 ounces, which puts it, well, not much heavier than a zinc aluminum Yaito, frankly. And it's just a joy to move around, honestly. It's not really quite long enough for me, but it's light. And after I had an elbow injury some time ago, I've been working lighter swords into my rotation a little bit more so that my elbow stays healed and I'm not just training with 4 and 5 pound Bertha huge sword. So I do enjoy moving it around. It's light, it's beautiful, and I can train with it for hours without really having a problem. And that's why I think this one is going to stick around for just a little bit. It's not, unfortunately, long enough for me, but it is light enough for me, and I happen to really like the aesthetic of it. So moving it around is overall nice. I feel like I have tip control. I feel like I can put the point where I want to. I feel like it has some authority in the cut. I feel like it's not so heavy that my wrists or arms get tired throughout the course of a class or a day training with it. The other bit that I didn't mention when I talked about the handle is that the fittings and handle have kind of a teardrop shape to them a little bit. And so when you bring your knuckles over the handle, they just kind of really rest in there very securely, and it gives you a sense of grip and purchase on the weapon that aids in the feeling of control. So I don't have as much problem with edge alignment and getting good the good wind sound, the good swishing sound as I'm moving this around. So that's another thing in terms of gripping it. It's just very comfortable, and it seems a well thought out training tool, which makes me wonder why they're not as popular. I know the Shinto was a popular sword. People like it. This is like a wavy version of the Shinto with the higher end steel. So I'm surprised that this was not a more popular seller for Hanwei. Now, I suppose that brings me to the end. Do I think this is worth it or not? Now, back in the day, this would have been probably around $1,000. And if I think about this in the assortment with the Orchid, I think I would, well, I like the look of the Orchid quite a bit. It has, well, it's just a classic, nice looking, lovely little sword from Hanwei. I do like the fittings on that, maybe more than I like this one. They're a little bit more unique, perhaps. But the blade here, this bohi and the folded steel are a better tool for doing kind of modern Japanese style swordsmanship practice. It's an easier training tool to hear as you're moving it around and throwing the blade out there to see if you got good edge alignment. The shape is a little bit similar to the Shinto, but I'm surprised that more people didn't like it. I guess the dragons of the Shinto are maybe more popular. Anyway, I'm not sure why it went away, but to me, it's basically the blade of a Shinto with a slightly different configuration of fittings, but it feels light and lively like that blade does, and similar to the Orchid as well, which are all on the light. And honestly, I enjoy training with all of those swords. So yes, if you like light, lively blades, then I believe this is worthy of consideration if you spot one out there. If you like what Hanwei has to offer with the folded steel, and the problems that I've outlined here aren't something that deter you, then I think this is a blade worthy of your consideration. But if you're looking for something robust and chunky to cut stuff with in the backyard, this wouldn't be something that I'd really want to do more than, I imagine you could take on tatami mats and stuff, but given its size, given that there's not a lot of weight here, I don't know that it's going to be a terribly forgiving sword in the long run. So if you're trying to do competitive cutting, I imagine it will cut, but it wouldn't be something that I would want to do several bad cuts with. Otherwise, I'd probably be straightening it out most of the time. Anyway, that's all I've got. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Cheers, and thanks for watching.